Hey everybody, it's Brodie Brown, Millionaire Mortgage Secrets. In this video, I'm going to run through a hot topic. It's always been a hot topic for as long as I've been in property, and that's negative gearing. I want to explain to you what it is. I want to explain to you how it works exactly, pros and cons without getting too deep or too political, when it works and when it doesn't work, and where in the, I don't know, $500 million of loans that I've written in the last 8 years, I've seen it really work. If you are an investor, you're a property owner, and you're looking to leverage your equity and your borrowing capacity, and maybe even save tax, as the property spruikers like to say, watch this video. Okay, so I think the first thing that I want to do now is explain to you what negative gearing is exactly. So negative gearing, all that really means is just a fancy term to say that the investment that you bought makes a loss. All right, so say negative gearing, so you're making a loss, all right? So at the end of the financial year, your income is less than your expenses, okay? Now, the opposite of that is true. So when a business or a property or investment is, you'd hope your business is positively geared, wouldn't you? So when an investment is profit making, it's positively geared, okay? So positively geared. I don't know why we use this term. It's a little bit dumb. As are many things in the world. So just to simplify it, just to help you understand it and decide if it's right for you, if negative gearing is something that you are planning on getting into, you want to buy a property that is not going to make a profit, you're going to make a loss, just say it. I own an investment property which makes a loss. I own an investment which makes a loss. Why do these investments usually make a loss, right? So it has a lot to do with the property market here in Australia. We just don't have the rental returns that a lot of investors have in or enjoy in other parts of the world, where they might have gross rental yields of 8, 9, 10, 12, 15%, okay? It's possible to achieve those rental returns in Australia. You just have to be a bit more creative with the property that you choose, okay? So then you start talking about things that are a bit more creative, like houses of multiple occupants, or NDIS, or variations of that same theme. So buying a house with 4 rooms and subleasing it, or someone or you, the investor, manages the head lease, and then you have 4 tenants or 5 tenants or whatever living in your property. Is that something that you want to do? You have to make a decision. It's not for me, but it's for some people, okay? So let's explain, and I want to help you understand exactly why most property investors in Australia have investments which make a loss. The reason is because the way that this starts is, this is their home, this is owner-occupied property, that's an O. Owner-occupied property. Generally speaking, for most Aussies, for most people around the world actually, in sovereign countries that aren't socialist, we're not socialist yet, most of a family's wealth starts with the family home. And what I mean by that, this is the owner-occupied property. Let's just say, for example, this place is worth $1.5 million. I'm saying $1.5 million because the property market in Australia is spastic right now. So look, that's kind of, probably above median, of course it is, but if you are looking at this kind of method of investing, then I wouldn't think that unless you have a property that's worth that much, that you're really, that you should really be considering investing in another property anyway. So here's what happened. You bought that 15 years ago, or whatever the case may be, and over time, maybe at the time you borrowed, say, 600 grand, okay, and you've been well behaved and you've done the right thing, and now, make it a bit more clear, and now that loan is, say, 250,000. So that's the original loan. The property's increased in value, and then you have this equity. So equity really is value, latent value, That's in another video. So the difference between 250 and 1.5 million is $1.25 million. To help you understand this in a very, very simple sense, I'm going to use a figure which is 80% of $1.5 million. And the reason why I'm doing that is because it's just easier to borrow money on fair terms against your home less than 80%. We can do it up to 90 or 95%. But then you start talking about things like lender's mortgage insurance, and that's it's a little bit unexciting. So we're going to do that in another video for people who want to get bored, all right? So 80% of $1.5 million, what's that? That's 1.2. Okay, so that's 80%, that's an M, that's 80%, all right? So we've got a big chunk of equity. Quick little segue into equity. Equity is latent value in a property. In order for, this is what everyone gets confused with, in order for you to be able to use equity, you need to extract it out of this property, because remember, you've got to pay someone for the other thing that you're buying, whatever that might be, okay? So therefore, the equity, the value in this property needs to be turned into something, and it's the something that we all love, which is debt, okay? So that needs to be turned into credit, if you want to put a more friendly term on it, in order for this equity, this value to be extracted out of the family home and used to buy something else. So if, for example, this investor, all right, Mike and Sally, let's call them Mike and Sally, all right, just totally made that up. Sound like a lovely couple. Have I used Mike and Sally before in another video? Maybe, maybe not. So you've got Mike and Sally, and these two want to buy a home. This is an investment property, and it's going to be worth, let's call it, they're high earners, all right, and it's going to be worth $1 million, okay? So where are they going to get the money from? They don't want to use any cash because they still have this loan. It serves them no purpose to repay their home loan ahead of any investment debt. It serves them no purpose to repay any investment debt ahead of their home loan. I did cover that in another video. Okay, so go have a look at that. I'll put the link in the description below. So how are we going to pay for the deposit and cost of this? Deposit and costs are going to be, making this up off the top of my head, stamp duty, settlement agents, rates and taxes, PEXA fees, mortgage registration, some other bullshit along the way. Look, let's just call that 45 grand, okay? So it's $45,000 in costs, and 20% of $1 million is 200,000, of course, all right? So against the family home, we're going to borrow, wow, these numbers are matching up here. So against the family home, we're going to borrow 245,000. 245K. Right, so you got $245,000 borrowed against the home. A lot of people get confused. Gee, there's so many segues in this, but a lot of people get confused, even sophisticated investors, and they're like, shit, Brody, you know, I've got this loan against the investment property. It's like, yeah, you kind of do. You've used that debt to purchase an investment property, but the debt is actually secured against the family home. And when I mean secured, I mean collateralized, or the family home. So this piece of real estate, this piece of dirt, and the house that's worth $1.5 million is being used to contribute the 20% deposit plus the costs of purchasing the investment property. All right. So technically speaking, and this is the way that you being a smart budding property investor need to understand it, is that $250,000 odd is going to be secured against the family home. So at the end of the transaction, you're going to have just shy of 500 grand secured against the family home. Okay, so I hope that gives you some clarity. So I want to split these down the middle here and just imagine that they're not cross-collateralized, cross-secured. Rightio, so we can't buy the house for 245 grand. We need an extra 800 grand, don't we? Right, so that 800,000 is going to be secured against this. So that's 80%. Can you see what's happening here? This investment property is really underwater at the beginning. And what I mean underwater, you're in the red, because let's think about this. The property is only worth how much? $1 million. But you borrowed $245,000. Remember, the government because we love them. They've taken $45,000 or 40 grand in stamp duty from you, plus 5,000 in costs and taxes and other stuff has just gone into the ether. And you've borrowed the 200 grand against your home, and you've borrowed $800,000 against the $1 million property. So you're actually really something like, what's 45 to make? So you're about 104.5. Shit, I hope my maths is correct here. So you're 104.5% geared is what we say. All right, so gearing is just another fancy term for leverage, or debt rather. I use that interchangeably. So do you understand what I'm saying here? So that 45,000, okay, that's just costs. That 200 and that 800, that million, that's going to the seller, less the real estate agent's fees, so marketing fees, right? So plenty of money changing hands. That's why transacting in properties in Perth, in Australia, is very expensive, all right? So you try to minimise that. Anyway, so coming back to this, you owe 104.5% of the value of the property, may as well call it 105%. So that's at the get-go. So what happens then? You following me? What happens then? Let's do a really simple calculation so that you can understand what happens next. And people are like, I've had a dude come in here, lovely bloke, and he's like, Brody, I just want to invest in some property. I want to invest in property to make money and shit. And I was like, cool. And this is what I explained to him. So I sat him down. I do 1 hour property and finance consultations I won't tell you the price now because I'm probably going to increase the price of them, but about $300 an hour for a consultation with me in person. So let's think about this. Let's work out what a mini P&L, mini profit and loss, looks like for a property investment that we just covered for Mike and Sally up here. Okay, so let's think about this. We've got the major costs. Let's do the income first, all right? So $1 million, let's imagine that you get a screaming price for the rent because the market's red hot, and that's at, say, 6%, all right? Rent. So you rent 6%. What's 6% of mil? 60,000, all right, per annum. So this is what's coming in. Okay, this is income. Now, that's the only thing. Unless you're growing weed in the roof, let me know. Just kidding. So let's just imagine that you can only generate one source of income from this property, and you can. Okay, without getting too complex, or we're talking about some of those other higher yielding investment properties that we discussed earlier, which are a whole different kettle of fish. That's what's coming in. Let's talk about what's going out. So help me out here. So let's talk about the first thing. You've got the interest on the mil, all right, because you've borrowed the whole lot. You've actually borrowed $1,050,000, $1,045,000. So the interest on that, let's just imagine that it's around 6%. Remember, interest rates go up and down. So these jokers who you see on YouTube, this guy, but you see a lot of property spruikers that are talking shit, and they're like, imagine that the finance is going to be 5% and it costs you this much over 30 years and blah, blah, blah. And that's bullshit, because in the last 30 years, we've had interest rates that have been way, way, way higher than 5%. Okay, so there's a huge difference in repayments, but on a $1 million loan, between 5 and 10%, like call it 50 grand, all right? So you're talking huge changes, but for the purposes of this little thought experiment, let's just imagine that you borrowed the money at 6% as well, because that's about right where we are right now. So 6%, $1 million, what's that? 60, hey, you know what? Let's make it really easy. So you're out, we'll make it 60 grand. Okay, so you get $60,000, could be 5.89%. So let's just imagine that the interest on the loan is $1 million. We're not going to worry about repaying the principal. And remember, repayment of the principal isn't an expense. The repayment of principal is a payment of the liability. So this is the P&L if you had a balance sheet. Okay, gee whiz, it gets complicated, doesn't it? So with your assets and liabilities, you've got your assets here, liabilities there. Let's just imagine that this is, I'm going to draw a house, all right? So as you repay the loan, this is your loan, you've got a, what do you say, $1,045,000, so $1,045,000. As that decreases and you repay it, and then over here, you've got an asset worth $1 million, and then over time, as this increases in value, the liability, you hope, when it begins to be repaid, declines. Okay, so you're actually growing an asset on your balance sheet, but when you start off, one's netting out the other, so you're actually negative. Follow me? That's another video. Alrighty, so come back to the P&L or the income statement. So in 60,000, you've got 60 grand on interest. What else you got? You got managing agents. So usually managing agents in WA charge around 10%. We're known as being the highest in the country. If you're over east, you're looking at about 6 to 8%, depending on who you're getting, including GST. So let's just say that we found someone over here, and it's about 10% of your income. So you've got management, you've got rates, call it 2.5 grand. Okay, you've got water. Forget what water is at the moment. Plumbing, sewage, so water 600. You've got insurance, so you have insurance for being a landlord, so you need landlord's insurance in case the tenants don't want to leave and don't want to pay, and you get some shit that winds up in court. And you need to insure the building in case it gets flooded or burnt down, or we have a nuclear war or something like that. So I reckon you're looking at about 1.5 grand all in. So that's your insurance, all right? Don't forget that you've got a home, and guess what homes need? They need maintenance. Okay, so what's that going to be worth each year? Call it what, 4 grand? Just in case, because you're going to have some years where you might have nothing. You might spend $1 grand or $2, and then the following year you might spend $8,000. So let's just say that maintenance is 4 grand. So you got 60,000. I'll make this really easy for myself. 60,000, 66,000, 70,000, 72.5, 74,600. I was never very good at maths at school, and look at me being a mortgage broker and not doing too badly at it. There's hope for us all. So check this out, what's going on here. You've got a $74,000 expense total and $60,000 coming in. So 60 grand coming in, and that's it. And you've got $74,000 going out. So what's happening? What's 60 minus 74, right? So you've got 14,600. So you're making a loss. That's cash, that's a cash loss. That's not including anything like depreciation, which for some expenses can also be included as a non-cash deductible expense. So this here is exactly what negative gearing is. Now, well, that's the first part. So that's the loss. Is everyone clear on that? Good. Let's just extend this a little bit further. We've got a loss of 14,600, all right? So 14,600, this is your loss, right? Alrighty, so if you are, let's just say for example, you're a high income earner and you're earning $220,000, right? If that, are you a high income earner on 220 grand at the moment? When 2 bags of shopping at Woolies costs you $200. I don't know. So you're earning 220 grand. Here's what happens. If you're an employee, during the course of the year, you've paid tax on $220,000. But at the end of the tax year, when your accountant does his numbers, they say, well, actually, Mike, you haven't earned 220 grand because you have this loss on your investment property. So you've earned, what's 220 minus 14.6? So that's 205 and 400, all right? So So the accountant says to you, well, actually, Mike, you've only earned 205, 400. So therefore, you are eligible for a refund. And the way they calculate that is they say, well, that's your loss. This is the easiest way of working it out. So that's your loss, and over $200,000 without getting to tax rates, but over 200 grand, you're paying 45 cents in the dollar plus a 2% Medicare levy. So to make this really easy, I just times that by 47%, the tax rate, or 0.47. Okay, so what that means is you get a tax refund. I did some maths earlier. So your refund is just a smidgen more than $6,800. Okay, so during the year you're carrying a loss. You are technically, as a landlord, subsidising the tenant's rent. There's no other way of breaking it down. That's what you're doing, because the cost of that investment property, because of the way that the market is in Australia, the cost of that investment property means that landlords, generally speaking, are subsidising, or you could say the taxpayer is subsidising in part the rental property. All right, so that 14,600 times 47% is $6,800. So that's what you get back at the end of the tax year. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, that's fucking crazy, and why would you do that? The reason is because the way that property increases in value, it has done historically, it's going to continue to do that forever because we've got more people and the same amount of land and a whole range of other things which we won't go into right now. But what you need to know to break this down and make it very simple for you to understand is that for the cost of, say, 14, let's just work this out, right? So you got 14,600 minus 6,800, so $7,800. So that's what you've had to invest, right? So that's $7,800. So for the cost of $7,800, you have managed to hold on to a home that's worth $1 million. And over the course of 10, 20, 30 years, that's the period that you hold it for. If you bought it at 50 and you flog it off at 80, or you will it to the kids or whatever, that $1 million property might end up being worth, who knows, it could be worth $3 million. That's an M. Okay, so for the cost of, what did we say, $7,800. So that's $7,800 per annum to own to hold a $1 million investment property. For a lot of people, this makes sense because most people are awful with their money, like totally shit with their money, all right? And I can tell because I've been doing this for a very long time, and I seldom see people, no matter how much they're earning, the poor people complain that rich people make too much money. I can tell you something, that the way that the rich spend, I think would make your eyes water when you see it often. Well, they're not actually rich, they're just hiring and also very good at spending. But where I was going with that is most people aren't very good at saving money. This loss that you're making, this $7,800 loss, okay, what you don't get refunded, you're saving money. So I like to say it's forced savings. Right? So there's nothing good or bad about it, that's just what it is. People who are in this sort of arrangement, providing that this home up here is of a decent quality, it's a high quality home, they're forcing themselves to save the money because they've invested in a property that makes a small loss each year. It's not a big deal, right? As in the loss that you make isn't a big deal, so it's not something to stress about. So that's negative gearing. That's how it works, okay? That's pretty much the nuts and bolts of it to a T. Now, expanding on that a little bit more is for who is this going to work out for, alrighty? Now, I'm very opinionated, fancy that, about negative gearing as a concept, but also who this works for. I believe quite strongly that depending on the price of the property, it doesn't work out for most people. And what I mean by that is I see a lot of people that are carrying on their home, that's a better looking home, These guys have got a home that's worth 800,000. Yeah, and they live in it, so it's owner occupied, and they've got 500 grand of debt on it. What's 20% of 800 is 640,000. So they really only have, in terms of affordable, usable equity, without getting too technical, 140,000 bucks. They might be in their 50s and they're still carrying this huge loan, and they've had it for years. For people like this, I would say, if you're in this category, don't invest, because you're not good with your money. And what I mean by that is that you haven't repaid that. That's got to go. That's got to go, because in this situation, you don't own your home. A lot of people come to me and they believe, or they feel, this is more a feeling, that if they invest in a property, their money woes are somehow going to be solved. Property spruikers love this shit, and they talk about how to pay your mortgage off in 7 years, and just a load of fucking bullshit. And it really gives me the shits, because often, and more often than not, it doesn't work out like that. I've seen dozens and dozens and dozens of people have to sell these new house and land packages on the fringes of town that have been flogged to them by unregulated, unscrupulous property spruikers. And look, it hasn't worked out in the way that the spruiker had told them that it would work out, i.e. that the property that they buy for 600 grand or whatever the case may be doubles in value, and then they sell it, and then all of a sudden they're going to magically have $500,000 after capital gains and costs to repay this $500,000. So if you're in this setup and you're in that kind of moderate income bracket, up to sort of $180,000, $200,000 a year, it seems like a lot of money, but after taxes come out, it's just not huge, right? And then you got to pay, you might have some kids, and you might have credit cards and car loans and stuff. So all of a sudden, you just don't have a hell of a lot of money. So just keep it simple. Just repay your loan. Repay your loan. Make extra. I can't tell you what to do with your cash, but maybe make extra contributions to super. Learn how to invest in other things. There's lots of other things you can put your money into. So I don't think that for average income earners, it works out really well. There's a negative gearing, and even property investing usually doesn't work out well for most people. Where it does work out really well is where the future landlord, like your future Mike and Sally, they're high earners. And when I mean high earners, they might be earning, say, 300 grand plus. I'm looking after a medical professional at the moment, and between he and his wife, I think they're on about sort of 650 plus thousand. Lots of business people, self-employed people who are earning north of that, right? So more than that. A lot of people do that. Very hard-working people, very good with their money, generally speaking, as well, who have taken a huge amount of risk. And the reality is that they are actively looking for ways to invest in very high-quality real estate and to reduce the amount of tax that they are paying on the way through. And they're doing it over the long term. This is not some strategy or some sort of a scheme to help them repay their loan in 10 years' time using some very dodgy information. All right, these are people that are generating wealth in their business or in their practice, and they're looking for ways to offload their borrowing capacity and use their borrowing capacity and leverage that by investing in real estate. Okay, so where this works very, very well is where people have bought properties that are going to, for example, they're in prime parts of town. Okay, this is where it works really well. They're in prime parts of town and they're investing, 1.5 million bucks plus. And what their plan is to do in the future is they're going to subdivide the property and split it up into two. Or they're buying an investment property, and because their income is so great, they have that free cash flow to repay their investment property loan. Usually, and I see this all too often is that most property investors don't ever get around to repaying the loan on their investment property. That might work, but in the end, you've paid all those costs to own that property over 25 or 30 years and you don't actually get to keep the cash flow. And if you ask me, when you retire, you want to wake up in the morning, every morning, and not have to freak out about money. And part of that is having consistent cash flow coming in, okay? And doing that in a way which also minimises the amount of tax that you have to pay on the way through, okay? So that's my explanation of negative gearing. That's a picture of a house, but I hope you enjoyed that video. I know this is really cheesy to ask you, but I'd appreciate it if you would like and subscribe, like the video and subscribe to the channel. It would really help me out. Thank you very much. And thanks for watching. If you want to book a call with me, click on the link below. Thanks.